A Britain's Got Talent disaster. A sliming on the streets of Waterloo.
No, the ice bucket.
And a drag costume. I'm currently struggling with something. I have a dependency of sorts, not to drinking or anything illicit. I don't gamble. I don't excessively shop or huff paint. I'm addicted to being bad, and not bad in like a cool way, like a bad boy, or in a way that's interesting, like a John Waters movie or a painting by an elephant. No, I mean bad in a way that's meaningless.
I am a huge fan of Susan Boyle.
And gratuitous.
I went on a TV show, and I embarrassed myself.
And publicly humiliating. And it's become a problem. And I think it's time for me to stop. But in order to stop, I need to understand why I did these things. And perhaps more importantly, I need to be forgiven. By the end of this video, I will have somehow found a way to relate all three of these seemingly unrelated objects. We will explore shame, atonement, the Bible, caves, jesters, and a goat. And I will have answered almost no questions. But first, a story. In Leviticus 16, there's a story, or more a set of instructions from God. In the previous chapter, God tells Moses how men can cleanse their bodies and how they can keep their material lives clean, their beds and their clothes. We'll put a pin in that for later. But Leviticus 16 instead instructs on how to cleanse not the material world, but the spirit.
Aaron shall take of the congregation of the children of Israel 2 kids of the goats for a sin offering, and Aaron shall cast lots upon the 2 goats, 1 lot for the Lord, and the other lot for the scapegoat. And Aaron shall lay both his hands upon the head of the live goat, and confess over him all the iniquities of the children of Israel. And the goat shall bear upon him all their iniquities unto a land not inhabited, and he shall let go the goat in the wilderness.
Aaron is instructed to take 2 goats, one to be sacrificed and one to symbolically contain all of the sins of the people of Israel, to be taken away into the wilderness and left there, the scapegoat. Further sources claim that the scapegoat, upon release into the wilderness, is sent to a place called Azazel, with some rabbis breaking the name Azazel into Azaz, meaning rugged, and El, meaning strong, a rugged and rough mountain cliff from which the goat was cast down. Other sources claim that Azazel is a deity itself, a personification of the wilderness, an elevation of a demon into a deity, but not quite Satan in like a modern Christian interpretation, more like this folkloric monster that was born out of a quite primal fear of a society that lived so close to the danger of nature. We'll put a pin in that as well. This ritual involving taking an animal, really 4 animals, but we won't get into it, and placing all the sins of a group onto it and then sending it away into the desert was especially important for the society for which Leviticus was written. Because of the nomadic lifestyle of the people of biblical Israel, their whole lives were focused around a relationship between the group and the wilderness, the adversary.
The point of the whole ceremony seems to have been that as the scapegoat was set free in the desert, so Israel was to be set free from the offences contracted in its desert life within the domain of the God of the desert.
The meaning of the scapegoat has evolved through time, from a specific object, a ritual vessel in which we place all of our failings, to a more broad term that really means anyone on which a group has placed blame, especially if that blame is unjust or allows the group to move on emotionally. Great. Okay, so scapegoating is about receiving atonement and emotional release, and it requires an imbalance of power between the sinner and the innocent to be scapegoated. Cool. So we're trying to answer a bunch of big personal questions, right? And we're using this metaphor and seeing where it can take us. But real people actual victims don't choose to be scapegoated. The goat doesn't choose to be sent out into the wilderness. That's kind of the point. But in all of these events, I chose to do what I did with full knowledge of the consequences. So what does it mean if the goat does choose? Where does the goat go after being sent away? And how does it get back? And so, the goat's journey begins. Yeah. It was October of 2025. I had just spent most of the year on universal credit. For those who aren't from the UK, that's basically welfare. We have a program in the UK that allows gainfully self-employed people to be supported for up to a year in order to build their business. And I was fresh out of university with a degree in music, and I had recently been paid what was, for me, a significant amount of money for a show I had acted and directed in. In my hubris, I believed that that money would continue. That this single invoice for a show hosted in a basement beneath a gay club, for which I had invested months of time and endless energy, represented a huge potential for earning, and that my business would flourish and that I would be booked forevermore. And I was painfully wrong. I spent the first few months working, so practicing instruments and networking and going to open mics and performing, and my emails and my DMs stayed dry. I was like, okay, that's fine, it takes time. So I continued. And eventually I got a text from a friend.
Hi, would you like to come perform in sound design for this play that I have written? It is very fun and interesting conceptually.
Yes, I would love to. Is it paid?
No, sorry, but we do have profit share.
But I did it anyway, and it was really fun. I'll give it that. The summer rolls around, and I end up producing my own show. It was called 120 Days of Bedbugs. It was a comedy. I'm actually quite proud of it, to be honest. It was really funny. And we finished the show, and I realised that I hate theatre and I hate music. So I start making TikToks, making a fool of myself online, being stupid, and some of them do really well. Some of them do really well. This one got 6 million views in its first month. Oh, fun fact, short form content, if not hosted on YouTube, makes almost no money. TikTok is kind of variable, Instagram, nothing. And I'm thinking, this business is a flop. My 9-month review is coming up for Universal Credit, and we have to log our earnings, and it's like 0, 0, 0. But then I receive a DM.
You've been a very bad
goat.
A very, very bad
goat.
Gaga.
And now you're out in the wilderness, lost in the desert. The sun is baking down on you. The dust, picked up by the wind, gets in your eyes and mouth. You would spit it out, but water is scarce out here. You wonder for hours, and you take the time to think about the situation and people that you chose to leave. Leviticus 16 talks about uncleanness and how it can be spread.
Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when any man hath a running issue out of his flesh, because of his issue he is unclean. Every bed whereon he lieth that hath the issue is unclean, and he that sitteth on anything whereon he sat that hath the issue shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water.
This is quite pragmatic advice for a pre-germ theory society. I mean, the Bible is basically saying that if you're a man and you have a weird discharge, mostly from the genitals, but it depends on your interpretation, there is an uncleanness to you that can only be rectified through washing with clean water and not touching others, and fairly good advice, right? But then, most interestingly, comes a sacrifice.
He shall number himself 7 days for his cleansing, and bathe his flesh in running water, and shall be clean. On the 8th day he shall take to him 2 turtle doves, and give them unto the priest, one for a sin offering, and one for a burnt offering.
This uncleanness of infection requires both a physical cleansing and a spiritual one. It's saying that not only are you yourself inherently unclean due to your sickness, a way of thinking which has survived all the way into the modern day. I mean, I think of queer men who sometimes ask, are you clean? To mean, do you have any STIs? But also that everything you touch when unclean is imbued with the same essence of uncleanliness. And it offers a solution. The only solution, which is ritualistic washing for a symbolic amount of time and ritualistic atonement through the killing of 2 animals by a priest. This is a lot of exposition. We got burnt offerings and sin offerings and scapegoats and cleansing rituals, and they all mean like different things, and they all have to be performed in precise ways, and it's all very complicated, right? And I'm sure it means something. Let's put pins in all of it, and we'll come back later. And besides, you, the goat, chose to leave it all behind. So why is it so much on your mind? But now, the sun is starting to set, and you need to find shelter fast. You look around the gloom and the dust, and you see a faint light in the distance. You walk towards it, and you come to the mouth of a cave.
Hi, hope you're doing well. I'm a producer with Unnamed TV show, and I've been loving your TikToks. Combining the theremin with sock puppets is genuinely genius. It's such a unique and entertaining variety act, and I think it's spectacular. I'd love to chat with you about our upcoming series, which begins filming between 67th and 69th of October. Would you be free for a quick call today? You can reach me on 999999999. Looking forward to hearing from you. Best, human person.
If you don't know, Britain's Got Talent is a televised talent competition created by Simon Cowell in 2007, following the success of his other television talent show, The X Factor. The programme takes the form of a vaudeville-inspired talent show, so showcasing performers of all disciplines. You've got dancers and singers, contortionists, whatever. The most famous contestant of this show is, by most accounts, Susan Boyle. She came as a runner-up in the 3rd season of the show after subverting the audience's perceptions of her as this like frumpy loon and showing her beautiful voice within when she sang I Dreamed a Dream. She would go on to have an illustrious career as a recording artist and has, at the time of recording this script, started a mysterious re-emergence into the public eye, which I personally await expectantly. The show is notoriously lowbrow. I mean, it's heavily produced and in its earlier seasons, extremely exploitative, especially of those who are like neurodivergent or delusional or otherwise unaware of how they would be received by a mass audience. As someone with all 3 of these characteristics, I was naturally attracted. But I also instantly smelt a rat. I mean, these were the TikToks that my casting producer was basing his judgment of my talent off of. Not exactly winning material, and I knew that. I had this act where I would play a theremin with a puppet. I kind of create this mockery of singing, and it did numbers. I mean, mostly because of how outlandish it was. It was great for an algorithmic audience who self-select their own material, but to a mass audience of like Tracy's from Birmingham or Steve's from Bromley, it's not going to do well. So I decided to pitch
redacted for contractual reasons.
It's reality TV. That's just how this works. But what makes this interesting is that this meant that I knew full well how I would be received from the get-go. I am delusional, but I'm not stupid. I didn't audition for this. I self-selected for it. I had a body of work. You can look down my Instagram page and instantly know that at the time I was a troll. I was a character, a jester. There was no authenticity to what I was doing. I was an actor, an empty vessel. I could look at my own work and I would know how I'd be received. I mean, the full extent of this act's reception was really down to how they edited me, but the broad strokes were kind of obvious. I would go, I would perform, and I would be buzzed, and I would leave with nothing. And yet I did it anyway. Why? My friends and family asked me why. My friends were like, what are you doing? Like, what's the point of this? Why submit yourself to public humiliation like that? To what end? I would leave to film in November. You, the goat, stand at the mouth of a cave. Can goats stand? There is a dim light coming from the inside. With the sun now firmly beneath the horizon and the temperature quickly falling, you decide that your only choice is to enter. Plato has a very famous story in his Republic. He asks us to imagine humans living in a long, winding cave,
which has a mouth open towards the light and reaching all along the den. Here they have been from their childhood and have their legs and necks chained so they cannot move and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning around their heads. Above and behind them, a fire is blazing at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners there is a raised way. And you'll see, if you look, a low wall built along the way, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show the puppets. And they see only their shadows, or the shadows of one another, which the fire throws on the opposite wall of the cave. To them, the truth will be literally nothing but the shadows of the images.
You, the goat, slowly trot down into the throat of the cave. There are shadows on the walls, playing out crude versions of things which you recognize from your own life. Objects and figures in motion. There are people chained how you remember Plato describing. You're a very well-read goat. At first, your instinct is to free the people chained in the cave. You think, what an awful life they must be living. They must yearn to see the sun. And then you remember that you don't have hands. You also remember Plato saying,
"He who is reluctantly dragged up a steep and rugged ascent, and held fast until he is forced into the presence of the sun himself, is he not likely to be pained and irritated? When he approaches the light, his eyes will be dazzled, and he will not be able to see anything at all of what are now called realities."
Trusting Plato's advice, you can't really see the point in even trying to help, so you find a quiet, secluded section of the cave, and you place yourself far away from the people in chains. As you move to your spot, you yourself pass in front of the fire and cast your own shadow on the wall. The people seem visibly bothered by your sudden presence in their world. Some laugh awkwardly, as if your abrupt entry were an absurd joke in a play. Some of them groan in discomfort. Some of them even try, but fail because of their chains, to look away. You try not to worry about it, or them. In fact, you feel quite pleased at their expense. I mean, who are they, right? They're just ignorant people who don't know truth. You know the truth better than any of them. You see the world as it is. Right? Right? You settle down for an uneasy sleep. Oh, I took the train to Blackpool and I filmed for a single day. I actually went to Birmingham first, but they
Redacted for contractual reasons.
and it was actually really fun. To be honest, filming was really fun. I mean, I knew exactly what to expect. I knew how it'd be received. It went exactly as planned. But I will say that it was still the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life so far. It should be kind of obvious that this is an edited TV show. The audience and the judges' reactions are
Redacted.
right? I mean, not really lies. Nobody's acting, but it is an extreme heightening of reality, hence reality TV. So it's not quite real. It's all just shadows on the wall, but the lived embodied sensation of being publicly rejected by like 2,000 people, even if they are just
Redacted.
it still feels real. It leaves a mark. It leaves a stain. Skip ahead a few months. I'm feeling strange. My episode has just aired, and I don't feel bad necessarily. I mean, I feel quite good actually. I feel quite affirmed by my life choices so far. I mean, I have chosen to, in a very small way, place myself at the fringe of a culture, right? I mean, I've chosen to stand alone in some very insignificant manner and be proudly different, and that's nice. But I still feel that stain. I need to wash it off somehow. I feel unclean. I begin to panic about my career. It feels like everything I touch is professionally dirty. If you Google my name, my stage name at least, some of the top queries are for the most embarrassing things I've done. I mean, the internet is forever. My digital footprint will forever contain, however small, this act of cringe. That's the first time I've used this word in this video, but that's what I was doing. It was cringe. Not only was the act itself cringe, but all the meta stuff around it was cringe. I mean, going on such a naff TV show, even to make fun of it, was inherently cringe. Making up a strange, inauthentic character, cringe. Using a fake name, cringe. Do you know how much airtime I received for my act? What all this mess and hullabaloo amounted to? 2 minutes. It was cringe. Cringe on cringe on cringe on cringe on cringe. Oh, I need my own ritual cleansing. Cringe Queens was a drag cabaret that I put on with my friends. It was about cringe culture. Our tagline was, "Cringe will set you free." I got all my friends together and we all did like different aspects and acts that explored things about cringe. So my friend Shay explored bronies, and Sven was X Factor, and I, naturally, was Britain's Got Talent. My act was quite strange. In summary, it had me vomiting on a puppet of Susan Boyle and then revealing a bedsheet with the words #SusAnalBumParty and then singing I Dreamed a Dream badly and then leading everyone outside to the streets of Waterloo, where I then had a bucket of green slime ceremonially poured on my face. It was really stupid, but honestly really fun, and also very symbolic. Leviticus 15 talks about how to cleanse yourself. It talks about how when you are unclean, everything you touch becomes unclean too, and how its solution is ritual. My solution was ritual too. It was an unclean emission from the body, and then a waiting period, and then a cleansing with liquid. So that's pretty on the nose then. I've ritualistically cleansed myself, somewhat cynically, but the symbolism is clear. It's done, and I can move on. Right. And yet I still feel wrong. The stain is still there, and I've clearly misunderstood something. In the Bible, these rituals are to be performed privately. These spiritual acts were intended to be performed in what is called the Holy of Holies, which was a small chamber within the temple, sectioned off from the rest, to contain the Ark of the Covenant, and only to be entered by the High Priest of Israel. But I chose to do this in public, and I mangled the ritual's design to be as grotesque and humiliating as possible. I performed the ritual, maybe not to the letter, but I did do it, more or less, but in doing so, I've repeated the exact same thing that made me feel so wrong in the first place. I chose to do it on the street. I brought out a whole audience of friends and strangers to watch me perform yet another act of public humiliation. I'm doing public humiliation right now. I'm in a bath of green slime. Sorry, I'm shouting. I guess that's why I chose slime and not water. I knew that it wouldn't be cleansing, and I'm just as stained as I was before. And I haven't answered the question, why? Why submit myself to public humiliation? Why did I do this bad thing and ask everyone to watch? Why? You don't sleep very well in the cave. It's damp and horribly cold. For a brief moment you miss where you came from, the people you chose to leave. Even now, lying far away from the shadow wall, you have isolated yourself from yet another group of people that might bring you comfort. You toss and turn, brief moments of rest, interrupted by cold plunges of wakefulness. Many things weigh on your mind. You're a very well-read goat, and you remember what Plato said. You've decided not to bother trying to help these people. They wouldn't understand your worldview. They would reject it. They would only see things that you see via the shadows they cast, not the things as themselves. But you're not that well-read. Plato, in the Allegory of the Cave, goes on to say a lot more things which you aren't aware of. He talks about how, with help and patience, someone who was brought out of the cave might begin to understand the world that they've entered. They might first understand it through reflections, and then 2D images, and then the objects as we see them. If this person wanted to see the sun, having grown up in a dark cave, he might first grow accustomed looking at the night sky, and then the day. He imagines how this person might then ask if what he now sees in our world is all there is. Or have they entered yet another cave? And Plato asks that if this awakened person were then brought back into the original cave and chained up again, having now learnt to understand the world not through shadows, but through images as we understand, might he have a very hard time adjusting back to the way of seeing in the cave? He might have forgotten how to communicate in shadows. He might be constantly trying to turn his head or his eyes, now used to the light. might be unable to adjust to the darkness. His friends in the cave that never left might think that he's become really quite stupid, and that his leaving the cave was not an ascension, but a lobotomizing. You, the goat, don't know any of this, because you're really quite an ignorant goat, a superior goat. In your smugness, you've decided that where you chose a life independent of others, in deliberate opposition to the people you left, the people in the cave chose ignorance and naivete, and would continue to choose it even if offered the option to see as you do. Only you see the world as it truly is. Suddenly, you wake up. Now for good. The fire that casts the shadows on the wall has long burnt out, and everyone is asleep. You wonder if the people in the cave also dream in shadows, or do they, asleep, see things as you do? You don't know. You figure it's impossible to know. These people are so different to you after all. You decide to leave. As you make your way to the mouth of the cave, you brush past one of the chained humans. A man. He stirs from his sleep and slowly opens his eyes and sees you, not as a shadow, but as you are, as you see yourself. You freeze. The wakened man studies your shape, slowly looking over your hooves and your fur and your horns, and then your eyes. You hold eye contact. There is so much in this man's eyes. They seem to contain vast oceans of things which you wouldn't possibly understand, you couldn't possibly understand. And then, abruptly, he smiles at you. Shaken, you turn away and exit the cave. The night is now at its peak. The sky has no stars. The dust of the desert is cold and still. Rugged cliffs in the far off loom in silhouette. Truly a desolate wilderness, you think. And then, through the black, a figure approaches.
We're going back slightly in time. Now I think it's like January of 2026. I had just released my first EP. It's called Dead Men. And I feel hollow. I filmed all this promotional material for it, but then it just kind of sits on my phone. Most of the promotion's really bad and half-assed. I think the EP is fine, but I didn't really try. So I feel hollow, and I don't know why. My usual solution to feeling hollow is just learning a new thing, starting a new project, learning a new skill, like filling up the vessel to distract myself from confronting the important questions. So I start sewing. I had never sewn before in my life. I had never touched a sewing machine. I had never designed clothing. I didn't know anything about it, but I was always interested in clothes, and I figured, if not now, when? I got this book, Winifred Aldrich's Metric Pattern something, what is it called? Winifred Aldrich's Metric Pattern Cutting for Women's Wear. I got this from TikTok Shop, guys. And I got the men's as well. Where is it? Here. I got the men's as well. This one, I haven't used it yet. And for 6 months, I became possessed. Every day after work, I would come home and I would sew. And I learned to draft all my patterns. And it turns out I'm actually quite good at it. Ta-da! Ta-da! Isn't it beautiful? Ignore the really long laces. Oh, do you like the ass? The silhouette? And I performed in it. And I performed in it again.
I change the thongs 2 times a day. It's Niagara Falls in this pussy all day. Remind ya, I'm kinda wet. Running down my vagina. Vagina, let's say it together. Remind ya, I'm kinda wet. Now scream it, remind ya, I'm kinda wet.
And I'm going to perform in it again, and I'm probably going to wear it to Margate Pride, and all of this feels like a distraction. Like I'm avoiding something. I'm just wearing the ritual clothing, but I'm not actually doing the ritual. And I keep coming back to the Britain's Got Talent question. Why did I subject myself to public humiliation? What is it about the public that I am so eager to annoy? Why have I placed myself at the fringe of things? And then I have a breakthrough. Did I feel superior to the audience? Did I feel that their rejection of me would be somehow affirming? That I am so unique that the audience couldn't possibly understand me, that I stand alone in the wilderness, singular, bearing other people's shame so that they might not have to confront their own, that they only see shadows on a cave's wall while I alone am brave enough to face the truth. Is that how I saw things? Is that the case? There was a family I met while filming in Blackpool that forced me to confront how wrong I was. It was a mum and a dad and their son, and they had come to Blackpool from somewhere in the UK, I don't know, to see the show. Britain's Got Talent is filmed with like a real audience of people. It was often regulars who come up every year to like have fun and enjoy themselves and have a good honest time. It was kind of like pantomime. And these were the people, this family, who had come to sit down basically next to me. This family were the people whose source of pleasure I had come up to mock, placed right in front of me. Plato says something really important in his allegory of the cave, which I think I would have massively benefited from knowing.
The power and capacity of learning exists in the soul already, and that just as the eye was unable to turn from darkness to light without the whole body, so too the instrument of knowledge can only by the movement of the whole soul be turned from the world of becoming into that of being, and learn by degrees to endure the sight of being and of the brightest and best of being, or in other words, of the good.
These people, this family that sat down next to me, were good. They were kind. They were friendly to me. They asked me if I was nervous, and I was, obviously. But when I explained my act, they said that they didn't really understand it, and they promised to like cheer for me no matter what. Like, that's such a really nice thing to do, especially when everyone around you is going to be probably booing. I don't know if they actually cheered, but they promised they did. And that's what mattered. And I felt like a fake. What was I doing that was worth cheering for? My act was designed to be bad. I was trying to provoke people, and I was hiding behind this facade where they had the courage to be kind to someone who clearly had nothing but contempt for them and the things that they enjoy. I was alone when I filmed. All the other contestants had family or friends or supporters with them. The contestants, for better or for worse, were all authentic people, genuinely trying to do their best and to show something that they believed was good. But not like me. I was a character. Plato says that the brightest and best of being is the good. So what was I doing that was good? I haven't left Plato's cave. In fact, I'm so deep in the cave, I have myself become the cave wall, adorned in shadows, completely without a face, without vulnerability. My sin, my cringe, was not doing an embarrassing thing in public. Plenty of people do that all the time. When you trip on the street or when you say the wrong thing in a conversation, those things are not sins. My sin, my bad thing, was the fact that I placed myself above these people, these kind people, that I thought my best was not worth them, that my taste level was so much higher that I wouldn't even bother to try. And this was the stain that I just couldn't wash out. There's this term. It's called Jestermaxxing. And that's what this video is really about. The word, which generally means
someone who acts overly funny or entertaining to garner attention from women and friends to compensate for lack of good looks, wealth, etc., often to the point where they become the butt of the joke and look like a fool or jester.
Was born in incel and looksmaxing forums back in the 2020s. The term slid out of those forums and then slowly gestated in underground internet subcultures until gradually it rose to viral prominence in 2025 when Clavicular and other influencers started using it in their content.
That's like, maybe 4 or 5 hours doing some Jestermaxxed, like bowling.
The term then instantly entered common parlance, and now it's everywhere.
I was put on this planet to be a jester. What a fucking jester.
Hey Anthony, I'm Jestermaxxing.
I think there's a reason why this word is so popular right now. I mean, if you open your TikTok feed and have a scroll through, chances are, and this does depend on your algorithm, you will probably come across a host of people doing stupid, silly, dumb, foolish things in hopes of exchanging that stupidity for likes and comments, which then theoretically can be exchanged for status. I mean, look at the American government, look at UK politicians, look at Elon Musk. They are all acting the fool for attention, and you can see behind their eyes that it is false. They are false. Their actions are false. They are characters. Worse than that, they are caricatures. They have traded their humanity for an illusion.
What did you do with Big Chungus?
If the most powerful people in the world can do these things and continue to get richer and continue to get more powerful and never meet consequences, then of course acting the fool, acting the goat, is going to seem like a natural path to power for the rest of us. And this is a new thing. There was this TV show called You've Been Framed, which aired on the UK channel ITV in 1990. Oh, I gotta move. Oh, fucking hell. This is really tough on the body. It was a clip show of personal videos of like normal people and friends or loved ones falling or being pranked or being silly in privacy. I mean, think America's Funniest Home Videos. People would send in these videos to ITV from all over the country in hopes of getting on the telly. It was definitely lowbrow, it was cheap TV, it was cheaply made, and it made you feel cheaper to watch. But there was a sense of authenticity to it. Before the rise of short-form content, people weren't filming this kind of material to get clout, or to get likes or reposts. ITV did offer to pay for videos, which definitely meant that there was an incentive to fake things, but not a social incentive. There was no system or structure like TikTok in which doing these things could allow a person to accumulate status in a way that can be measured. You didn't get followers for going on this show. You've Been Framed was not a road to influence. It was just for a laugh and maybe a bit of cash. In her book, Animal Joy, psychoanalyst Noir Alsadir talks about clowning and how it can be used to access what she refers to as the true self.
The process of trying to find your clown involves going through a series of exercises that strip away layers of socialization to reveal the clown that has been there all along, or in Winnicott's terms, your true self.
She's building off an earlier idea originated by psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott. Winnicott thought up this concept of the true self, a sense of self based on spontaneous, authentic experience, without the burden of social expectations. And this true self can be accessed briefly through moments of ecstasy or loss of control, so like laughing uncontrollably at something which really isn't that funny, or bombing on stage and acknowledging the fact that you're bombing, or when you just move your body on impulse. Alsadir argues that the act of authentically clowning, telling jokes, acting the fool, but from a place of real, honest confession and expression, has power to make positive change, not only within ourselves, but also without, in the material and political world. In her book, she often quotes George Orwell's line, "Every joke is a tiny revolution." More darkly, she talks about the false self, Winnicott's inverse of the true self, the facades we build around ourselves, the lies we tell to protect ourselves from harm, the character we show to the world. And she relates it to the false clown, referencing the words of Marie-Louise Parker. She says,
Donald Trump, for instance, has been referred to repeatedly as a clown, but he is a clown who does not clearly step out of reality and into the show. He is a fake clown. Rather than revealing his humanity, Trump is always trying to pass off one emotion as another. He sells you steadfast when at his most unsteady, and that makes him transparently insecure.
The false clown is one whose cartoonish embodiment isn't born from a genuine access to the self, to passion and spontaneity, but from the construction of a vast void between one's identity and beliefs and values and one's expression. Jestermaxxing, in my opinion, is an expression of this. It is the performance of humour and foolishness without the honesty of confession and humanity, and then tied up in a system that rewards more and more extreme alienation from the self. In 2022, the TV show You've Been Framed was cancelled, just as Jestermaxxing was about to rise to prominence. And this makes absolute sense. As media like TikTok or whatever arise that reward acting inauthentically for clout, so will people flock to those media in hopes of scooping up some of that juicy engagement. And inversely, media built from more authentic, spontaneous humour will wither. We don't even need to be paid for it. At least ITV offered £250 for a video. We'll do it for free. We'll edit and post it ourselves. No need for a studio or for professional help. We'll do it solo. This kind of humour is no longer you've been framed. It's you have framed yourself. And I fell for it. That's exactly what I did. I framed myself. Throughout this whole video, I've implied that the bad things I did were the public humiliation, that it was bad to be cringe, that I required absolution from being embarrassing, from being the fool. But I don't think that's right. I agree with Alsadir. I mean, foolishness itself is not the problem. In fact, it could be a solution. My bad thing is the way I approached it. It's the fact that I believed when I made up a character and went on TV and bombed, or when I posted a bunch of humiliating TikToks designed purely for engagement, or when I went onto that street and got slimed and filmed and posted it, that I genuinely believed that touching something as sacred as laughter without humility and honesty could in any way be a road to power or to truth or to self-discovery. Even more insultingly, it was the fact that I believed that the audience was not worthy of my best, not worthy of truth or honesty, and that they should be happy settling for this hollow, string-thin simulacra of a person. And it is that for which I am seeking atonement. Why do we do bad things? I don't fucking know. I'll ask a different question. How do we stop? Plato, in his allegory of the cave, talks about levels of enlightening. That just because we feel that we have left the cave of shadows, that just because we feel that our world of understanding is material and tangible and correct, there is nothing to say that we haven't substituted one ignorance for another. He imagines that we might live in a successive series of caves, that as we leave one, we enter another. So what does he place at the end of that series of caves? What lives just outside the final mouth, at infinity? What is the highest level of understanding? Plato says, the good. Everything is still in the desert. The sky is black, without stars. Rugged cliffs in the far off loom in silhouette, and a black figure approaches. Like with the man in the cave, you freeze. Who is this? Who knows you're here? Did someone follow you? Nobody could have known. You didn't tell anyone you were leaving. And then a shock of dread floods your thoughts. Azazel? Could it be? The demon-turned-deity, the avatar of the wilderness you escaped to. Have you fallen that far? Have you sunk that low? Is that the shadowy figure that comes to you now? You try to think, what does it want with me? Can I reason with it? Where will it take me? The black figure approaches, and as it does, the curtains of silhouette lift, and through the still gloom appears another goat. Oh, that's a bit embarrassing. How did it get here? Who sent it? Oh, of course, somebody must have left it. Another scapegoat from a previous ritual. Oh, that makes sense. The goat does goat things. You watch the goat doing goat things. This creature that supposedly contains all the evil and sins of a whole people is currently chewing on a dead weed. How anticlimactic. You think again about the people you left. What was that thing you did that was so bad you had to leave? Do you remember? Do they still remember? Did they ever really mind? Does any of it matter? You look down at your hands. They're not hooves anymore. They never were. You look around. There's a breeze picking up. It brushes across your cheek and blows through your clothing. You stand to your full height, a man's height, and you pick up the animal. The sun is rising, and it's time to go home.
For the whole video, I've used this metaphor of the biblical scapegoat to describe my own moral journey, right? I started off believing that I was in some way a victim, that the choices I made were in opposition to a society that would inherently reject me, and we now know that's not true. I am not the goat. I'm not a victim. If I'm anyone, I'm Aaron, performing a ritual to atone for my perceived sins. Like right here, I've got the incense, I've got the fire, this screen, this frame is my Holy of Holies. So that begs the question, who is my scapegoat? What is my scapegoat? What is my empty vessel within which I am pouring all my confessions and my iniquities and sending away? Have I got a real goat in the wings somewhere? Yes. No, I don't. Is it this performance or this costume? No. Is it this video itself? Am I sending this transmission out into the desert of YouTube? I mean, I doubt this video will get more than like 500 views in its lifetime, and the YouTube homepage is basically like a desolate wilderness. So, I don't know. The book of Leviticus describes a set of rituals in which we are instructed to pour meaning into what are essentially meaningless things. So animals and clothing, water, blood. In pouring meaning into material, we can then manipulate that material to make direct change to the spiritual. In burning flesh, we bring light. In spilling blood, we spill ourselves. And in surrender, we are permitted to move on. Am I doing the same things with these three seemingly unconnected events? Am I pouring meaning into the material so that I might also be released? Well, yeah, obviously. If you like this kind of stuff, then I have a Patreon. There is more coming, and thanks for watching. Bye.